It was just amazing. He just brings a lot of life to the presentation. Everybody who attended at that function was just totally blown away.
He really captures you. You know, you don't have a moment to think about anything else, check your phone, you're taking notes, you're engaged, you're listening to him. He was great.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you so much. What a great introduction. I really appreciate that, Darren. There's no one I'd rather have introduced me with our history together. And I'd like to welcome you all here today. How's everyone doing today? All right, all right. Before we get started, may I have your permission to speak quickly? Can I keep the program going at a good pace? Is that okay? Yes. Great. And the reason I do that is this. Do you know the average rate of speech for most people is about 150 words a minute? However, every one of us have the ability to easily listen at about 400 words a minute. Now, if I'm up here speaking at 150 words a minute, but you're listening at 400 words a minute, what starts to happen? Boredom, daydream, drifting, sleeping, right? My job right now, keep your attention right here the whole time. And if I can fill up the entire 400 words a minute, your brain won't have anywhere else to go. The other good thing is this, I can actually cover twice as much information in half the amount of time, which is good time management, right? Yeah. And heck, if you can only catch half of what I say, we're still leaving. All right, you'll get used to me.
It's fast. It's as fast as it needs to be. And again, when somebody's polished, they're polished.
What I really like is the strategies. It's interesting as well to have life stories, you know, example, but to focus on strategies is also very good. That was my favorite part.
Michael Jeffries was awesome. I really liked the part about the visualization.
Let me take you back to the time with Darren Powers, after I had just gotten started with this sort of stuff, gotten through all of his audio programs, was getting ready to go on a vacation, and I asked him to loan me a good book. He said, sure, man, I got a good book for you. He said, absolutely. He goes right to the top bookshelf. He hands me a book. It's called Think and Grow Rich. How many here have read the book? All right, a lot of you, wow, I'm impressed. If you're not familiar with that, this book was written by Napoleon Hill back in the 1930s. He was hired by Andrew Carnegie, one of the big rich guys, to study, get this, 500 of the richest, most successful men and women in the world at the time, and his job was to study them, interview them, research them, figure out how did they go from rags to riches, how did many of them create great success from nothing, and the man didn't just spend a couple of years, he spent 25 years of his life doing the research and the interviews and the background work before the book even got published. And when it did get published, it became an international bestseller, and it still is a big seller today. Now, as I was reading the book, there were some chapters in there that really intrigued me, talking about the power of the mind, talking about the sixth sense, this creative intelligence, this infinite intelligence. It talked about the ability to literally attract into our lives people, circumstances, good fortune, good luck, and more by using the power of the mind and the power of thought. And I thought to myself after reading that, my goodness, if what they're talking about in this book is really true, this would have tremendously powerful implications of what we can do with our lives. We could make way more money. We could dramatically improve our health. We could dramatically improve our relationships. We could do all kinds of great things. And then I never did anything with it. How many of you here read something powerful, you never did anything with it? Yeah, that's happened to most of us. Well, that's happened to me until about 17 years went by. And all of a sudden...
It's fantastic. It's fast-paced. It's energetic. There's great information.
He knows exactly what he's talking about, so I like that.
He speaks faster than anybody that I know, and I thought I spoke fast, and you understand everything that he's saying. He's really quite amazing, and his Yes Network is awesome.
Now, when I had someone explain this to me in a similar way to the way I just explained it to you, this was a number of years ago, I got to be honest with you, I looked at that guy and I'm like, come on, man, you got to be kidding me. Dude, you're telling me that we just send off invisible brainwaves and more money shows up, more love in my life, more new car in my driveway? Come on, man. I think it's, what have you been smoking? You're thinking, man, that's far out there. I mean, I've heard of stuff like that before, but I got to be honest with you. It just sounds ridiculous. You think something and all of a sudden something shows up, man. It sounds ridiculous. Sorry, dude, I got to go, and I left. Now, as I was driving home that day, for some strange reason, my own words kept ringing through my mind. I kept hearing myself say, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. I was laughing to myself about it, but you know what? It actually did. It actually caused me to rethink my own thinking. And for some reason, I couldn't get that out of my mind. It caused me to kind of really dig into that thinking of why am I thinking this is ridiculous? And I thought back on the book Think and Grow Rich. And I thought, wow, in that book, man, rich, very successful, very famous people all swearing by this principle. I thought about the book that my dentist gave me on Law of Attraction. That made a lot of sense about it. I thought about the Oprah and the Larry King interviews where they really waste their airtime if there was nothing to it whatsoever. The movie The Secret. I thought about the audio program by Brian Tracy where he's talking about it like it's the way the world works. I know it sounds mystical and far out there and downright kind of hard to believe, but I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe there is something to all this. And at that moment, being a very open-minded person, as I've always been, I decided to myself, I said, you know what? If there is something to this whole law of attraction thing, I'm going to put it to the test to see if it's real. So a number of years ago, with a completely open mind, I set out to test this whole thing we call law of attraction. Let me tell you about some of the things that happened during the testing period.
He made some very good points, very valid. I really liked his 5 steps.
Speaks very fast, which is also keeps everybody's attention, so nobody's falling asleep.
Exciting, you know. I'd like to have that enthusiasm on all my sales calls.
If I had a lot more time, I could tell you dozens more stories during the testing period. It wasn't just the 3 stories I just told you to test it. I tested and I tested and I tested, and they all came true. And if I had a lot more time, I could tell you thousands of stories after the point that I proved it to myself, because I use law of attraction every single day, all throughout the day. I'm constantly tuned into it, and I am aware it is the most powerful force that we have as human beings to achieve all the greatness that we want in life. However, I'll also say this. It is not enough to just know about law of attraction. I know all kinds of people, they know all about it. Sure, they have read Think and Grow Rich. They've studied the power of the mind. They've seen the movie The Secret, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what? They're still living here. We're going to call this mediocre. They want to be living up at this level, but they're still living at this level. And the burning question I've had in my mind is, why is it that especially people who already understand the power of the mind, let alone everyone else, are living in mediocrity when they could be up here? And the conclusion I've come to, it is not enough to just know about law of attraction. You need to do what I call activate the law of attraction. So what we're going to do right now, I'm going to give you 5 very specific action strategies. What can you do right now to activate the law of attraction in your life? And if you're going to take notes, this is a great time to do so.
I've heard him speak at Arbonne and at one of the Albion chapters, and it was so uplifting and interesting. And the whole Yes Network has been a real benefit to me. Okay, action strategy number 1. What are the last 6 letters of the word attraction? Action. A-C-T-I-O-N, action. That is action strategy number 1. But let's not define it as just action. Let's expand the definition a little more. Let's not just say action. Let's say consistent, immediate, definitive action on our inspired thoughts. Not just action, but consistent, immediate, keyword underlined, immediate, definitive action on our inspired thoughts. What do I mean by that? You ever get an idea pop in your head like a good idea? Like maybe you're in sales and you think, oh, maybe I could call on that new prospect. That looks like a good lead for me. You ever think that? Yeah. But then what do you do next? A lot of times, what do? We wait. We put it off. We say, oh, but tomorrow, I'll call him tomorrow, or I'll call him next week. Law of attraction says when you think of an idea and you get an inspired idea, when do you want to act on it? Immediately. That's the key word. Most people, they don't do that. And it's no wonder nothing happens. It's like a pond. If we had a pond right here on a nice calm day, what would you see on the pond? Nothing but glass. It would look just like glass. If I took a big old rock and threw it in the middle of the pond, what would happen right away? Ripples would go across the pond. That's like your thought. You have a thought, it's like the ripples are going through your mind. If we wait 20 minutes, what is the pond going to look like again on a calm day? Glass again. You have to act while it's hot. You got to act while the energy is there. That's your job. So you got to start listening to your inner voice. When you get an idea, when you get an inspired thought, you got to ask yourself this question. If I'm going to do something with this thought, what is the very next action step I would take? What is the very next action step I would take if I'm actually going to do something with this idea I just thought of, and then do it immediately? If you're not busy right that second, you make the call right there. You knock on the door. You submit the ad. Whatever the process is, the question, what is the very next action step I would take? And then you take the step immediately, and you're going to be amazed at what happens, because you'll say to yourself, wow, if I wouldn't have done that, well, then this wouldn't have happened and that wouldn't have happened. You know how one thing leads to a chain of events? You'll be able to backtrack and say, if I wouldn't have done that one thing, none of all these other things would have happened. I do that all the time. It's truly amazing. And you know what it all boils back to? One single action step taken at the time of inspired thought. It always goes back to that. So you've got to start tuning in when you get a good idea. Oh, that's a good idea. Wow, I've got to do something with that. What's the very next action step? And then when do you want to do it? When? Immediately. And you'll be amazed at all the great things that come out of your life. So start taking immediate action. Do it now.